public marriage counseling session. So I think it's going to be a little bit of both, and the evening just got a lot longer. It's great to see a lot of old friends here tonight. I don't get back to Montana as much as I'd like to, but it was fantastic seeing our next governor, Steve Bullock. Steve and I were very close friends as children, and I said to him earlier, what happens in Smith School stays in Smith School. I mean, the press is going to find out one way or another. I will say, however, that I think he disappeared my sister's dog. This is Pat and Carol's 46th year as a married couple, and no one thought that would happen. For any of you guys that know my parents really well, they have 3 interests that they share. Yankees baseball, I'm pausing for the jeers. The state of Montana, obviously, and Democratic politics. So that's why we're here tonight. They actually met a young Democrats dinner in Butte. And as the story goes, Dad asked Mom out on a subsequent date to a Young Democrats event a few weeks later, whereby he showed up with another girl, who he introduced to Carol as his cousin. And think about that for a second. Let it soak in. You guys know that he's convincing. And, you know, through a series of lies and deceptions, ultimately convinced her to marry him. Now, when they realized that they had this really narrow window of shared interests, any straying from these topics would be sheer demise. Right? The marriage was going to be doomed. So they began a life together that required them to really diligently stay on topic. Politics and public service became their collective cause, and that's why we're here honoring the 47 years. Even today, they've never let up. Even though many loudly and frequently urge them to. I mean, we were saying that I don't think the lead newspapers would have a letter to the editor section if Pat hadn't been elected. I mean, he hasn't been in office since 1996, and all they ever publish is bitching and moaning about it. Even still. As my sisters can attest, growing up in a political family is, in all truth, a little challenging. Your lives become this strange mix of the public and the private. And it's not that it wasn't a great childhood. I mean, there's not, what's not to love about a lifetime in politics? As a child, getting to spend weekends campaigning in planes. What kid doesn't love going door to door in strange, unfamiliar towns? I mean, 10-year-olds love creeping up to the screen door in an unfamiliar house and then asking the guy who opens the door to please help your family. Living out of campers. I mean, when I say it out loud, it sounds more like something they'd be investigating on Nightline, but it was a fine upbringing. In 1967, I celebrated my first birthday on the floor of the Montana legislature with all the other kids. Pat was serving as a new member, and he tried to convince me that Francis Bardno was just a really big kid. He was just large for his age. At home, clamorous debate was kind of the way we communicated with each other. Issues were always loudly debated, and we were instilled this sense of civic responsibility. For any of you who have ever been over in the middle of the day, nightly news or the news in general is not something that's turned on in the house. It's always on in the house. And I thought for years that the TV was actually invented as something to scream at. You could never hear the TV because of their loud rum commentary over everything. What did he say? Growing up in this environment tends to breed opinionated, often foul-mouthed children, as you know. When I was in kindergarten, the school called Carol, and they said, Griff's done something, you gotta come down, he's used some inappropriate language, and we have to have a parent-teacher conference. Well, the first of many for Mom, but she, okay, so she goes down and she says, what did Griff do? And the teacher said, well, I asked him if he knew who the president was, and he said, that son of a bitch, Richard Nixon. Which was his legal name. You know, traveling the state with my folks, we saw my dad hung in effigy, which wasn't funny. Saw angry voters around the state shout him down. Spent lots of time behind cars with bumper stickers that said, no wolves, no wilderness, no Williams. Which, I don't know why you couldn't have found one of those for them. Through all this, we saw the depth of our parents' commitment to their principles. Dad used to repeat the John Quincy Adams quote, stand on your principle even if you stand alone. That made for a really inspirational upbringing. I mean, nothing gets kids excited like quotes from John Quincy Adams. Right? Parents out there, you know what I'm talking about. Watching their commitment to their beliefs made my sister and I strive to find our own authentic voice to speak in and our own causes to fight for, and we've done that our lives. I know that my parents' example has instilled the same kind of desire in countless others around the country. Pat served Montana in Congress for 9 consecutive terms, as Nancy said, and he's the longest serving member of the House in the history of the state of Montana. In all truth, I mean, yeah, clap. All right, that's fine. You can clap. Yeah. I mean, in truth, it says more about people not wanting that job than it does right? I mean, in all seriousness. But when you think about this, he won all those elections as a plain-spoken progressive Democrat in a so-called red state during the Reagan and Bush administrations, the contract with America, the culture wars, the Gingrich Revolution, all while he's standing up for labor, the disabled, the environment, and the arts. How's that happen? During his tenure, he created the College Middle Income Assistance Act, the Toddlers and Childhood Disability Act, designated the Lee Metcalf Wilderness Areas, Rattlesnake Wilderness Area, passed legislation to save the Bob from oil and gas exploration, banned geothermal drilling near Yellowstone, created the American Conservation Corps, high school at Northern Cheyenne, Two Rivers Eagle School in Pablo, passed the first law signed into law by President Clinton, the Family and Medical Leave Act. And as Nancy said, he saved the National Endowment for the Arts. Former chairman of the NEA, John Frohnmeyer, called Dad a tireless and fearless supporter of the arts who risked his political career in doing so. I lived through it. He did exactly that, and we all ought to be thanking him for that. Yeah. He battled Jesse Helms and Pat Robertson. He was Porno Pat to a lot of people, not in this room, but as you remember, it was out there, people. 700 Club running his phone number. In those years, he battled the right-wing religious zealots in favor of a nation that champions its cultural riches and supports the free exchange of ideas, and in his spare time, turned Ron Marlenet into a lobbyist.